On August 2, 216 BC, the Roman Republic suffered its most catastrophic military defeat near the village of CANNAE, in southeastern Italy. The battle was fought during the Second Punic War between Rome and Carthage. The Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca commanded approximately 50,000 troops against a Roman force of 86,000 soldiers. The Romans believed their numerical superiority would crush Hannibal once and for all. Hannibal arranged his forces in a crescent formation with a deliberately weak center designed to lure the Romans forward. As the Roman legions pushed deeper, the Carthaginian flanks held firm while cavalry destroyed the Roman horsemen. The African infantry then closed in from both sides, completely encircling the massive Roman army. Trapped soldiers could barely raise their weapons in the crush of bodies. The slaughter that followed killed over 100 Romans per minute at its peak. By nightfall, between 50,000 and 70,000 Romans lay dead, including Consul Paulus, 80 senators, and 29 military tribunes. Hannibal lost approximately 6,000 men in exchange for annihilating the largest army Rome had ever assembled. An estimated 20% of Roman fighting men perished in a single afternoon. The double envelopment tactic executed at CANNAE remains studied in military academies worldwide to this day. Despite this devastating defeat, Rome refused to surrender and eventually turned Hannibal's own lessons against Carthage. The battle demonstrated how tactical genius could transform overwhelming numerical advantage into complete destruction. CANNAE stands as history's most perfectly executed tactical victory. The Battle of Stalingrad, fought from July 17, 1942 to February 2, 1943, stands as the bloodiest battle in human history. Nazi Germany attacked the Soviet city on the Volga River with the intent of capturing this vital industrial center. For Adolf Hitler, the city bearing Joseph Stalin's name held immense symbolic importance. The German Sixth Army under General Friedrich Paulus began the assault following devastating aerial bombardment. The initial bombing killed approximately 40,000 civilians within the first week and reduced the city to rubble. Soviet defenders under General Vasily Chuikov fought room by room and floor by floor in brutal close-quarters combat. The average life expectancy of a newly arrived Soviet soldier was just 24 hours. Snipers became legendary figures as every building transformed into a fortress. On November 19, 1942, the Soviets launched Operation Uranus, encircling approximately 300,000 Axis soldiers. Hitler refused to allow a breakout, ordering his men to fight to the death while the Luftwaffe attempted a doomed airlift. By February 2, 1943, the starving remnants of the Sixth Army surrendered to Soviet forces. Of the 91,000 Germans taken prisoner, fewer than 6,000 would ever return home. Total casualties from the battle approached 2 million, including 800,000 Axis and 1.1 million Soviet military casualties, plus 40,000 civilians. The battle marked the turning point of World War II on the Eastern Front. The German army never recovered from the loss of an entire field army and its best equipment. Stalingrad demonstrated the limits of blitzkrieg against determined resistance and remains the deadliest battle ever fought. The Battle of Verdun, fought from February 21 to December 18, 1916, became the defining symbol of World War I's endless carnage. German Chief of Staff Erich von Falkenhayn chose Verdun specifically because France would be compelled to defend it at any cost. His stated goal was to bleed France white through a war of attrition. The offensive began with over 1 million shells fired within the first 9 hours. Fort Douaumont fell within days, sending shockwaves through France as General Philippe Pétain organized the defense. He declared that the Germans would not pass and established a massive supply route called the Sacred Way. Over 3,000 trucks carried men and munitions along this single road to the besieged fortress. Approximately 70% of the French army would eventually fight at Verdun. The fighting ground on for 10 agonizing months, with both armies feeding division after division into the meat grinder. Constant bombardment created a lunar landscape where an estimated 70% of casualties came from shellfire alone. French forces eventually recaptured Fort Douaumont in October and Fort Vaux in November. By December, the front lines had barely shifted from their original positions. Combined casualties exceeded 700,000, with approximately 300,000 soldiers killed and 400,000 wounded. 9 villages were completely obliterated and never rebuilt, designated as having died for France. The Douaumont ossuary contains the remains of 130,000 unidentified French and German soldiers. Verdun remains etched in memory as the ultimate symbol of industrial warfare's horror. On October 1st, 331 BC, Alexander the Great led his Macedonian army against King Darius III of Persia on the plains of GAUGAMELA in present-day Iraq. The 25-year-old Macedonian king commanded approximately 47,000 troops against a Persian force estimated between 100,000 and 250,000 soldiers. Darius had chosen flat terrain and even leveled the ground to maximize his chariot and cavalry advantage. Victory would give Alexander control of the largest empire the ancient world had ever known. Alexander's plan relied on creating a gap in the Persian line through bold maneuver, then exploiting it with a devastating cavalry charge. When battle commenced, Darius unleashed his scythed chariots, but Macedonian troops simply opened gaps to let them pass harmlessly through. Alexander led his companion cavalry in a sweeping movement to the right, drawing out Persian cavalry and creating precisely the gap he needed. Forming his men into a wedge, he charged directly toward Darius himself. Darius witnessed Alexander's charge heading straight for him and panicked, fleeing the battlefield on his chariot. His flight shattered Persian morale, and the army collapsed into chaotic retreat. Macedonian forces pursued the fleeing enemy, inflicting an estimated 40,000 casualties, while suffering fewer than 1,000 themselves. The victory effectively ended the 200-year-old Achaemenid Empire in a single afternoon. Following Gaugamela, Alexander marched unopposed into Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, seizing the vast treasures of Persia. Darius fled eastward, but was eventually murdered by his own satraps. The battle established Alexander as undisputed master of Asia and secured his place among history's greatest military commanders. Gaugamela demonstrated that tactical brilliance could overcome even the most overwhelming numerical odds. On October 14, 1066, Duke William of Normandy and King Harold II of England clashed on a ridge near Hastings to determine who would rule England. The conflict arose from a disputed succession following Edward the Confessor's death earlier that year. Harold had already destroyed a Norwegian invasion at Stamford Bridge just weeks earlier and force-marched his exhausted troops 240 miles south. Both armies numbered approximately 7,000 men each. Harold positioned his Anglo-Saxon forces atop Senlac Hill in the traditional shield wall formation, anchored by elite housecarls wielding deadly two-handed axes. William opened with arrow barrages, followed by infantry assaults up the steep slope. The Norman cavalry charged repeatedly, but could not break the disciplined English line. The battle raged inconclusively throughout the morning hours. The turning point came when Norman cavalry feigned retreats, drawing undisciplined Saxon troops to break formation and pursue. William used this tactic repeatedly, slowly whittling away Harold's forces throughout the afternoon. As evening approached, Norman archers fired in high arcs over the shield wall. King Harold was struck and killed, traditionally believed to have been hit in the eye. With their king dead, the remaining Saxons fled into the approaching darkness as Harold's brothers Gurth and Leofwine also fell. Casualties are estimated at 2,000 Normans and approximately 4,000 English killed. William marched on London and was crowned on Christmas Day, beginning the Norman conquest. The battle transformed England's language, culture, and institutions forever. The Battle of the Somme, fought from July 1st to November 18, 1916, became synonymous with World War I's senseless slaughter. British commanders planned a 7-day artillery bombardment to destroy German defenses before the infantry assault. Over 1.5 million shells rained down on German positions along a 15-mile front. However, many shells were duds, and German soldiers sheltered safely in bunkers up to 40 feet underground. At 7:30 a.m. on July 1st, over 120,000 British soldiers climbed out of their trenches, expecting minimal resistance. German machine gunners emerged from intact bunkers and began firing into the exposed British ranks, advancing in orderly lines. Row after row of soldiers fell before reaching the enemy wire. The first day became the bloodiest in British military history. The British Army suffered 57,470 casualties on July 1st alone, including 19,240 killed, most falling within the first few hours. Some battalions lost 90% of their strength in minutes. The Newfoundland Regiment went over the top with 801 men and suffered 684 casualties within 30 minutes. The offensive continued for another 4 months until November, when the Allies had advanced just 7 miles. Total British and French casualties exceeded 600,000, while German losses approached 500,000. More than 1 million men were killed or wounded for virtually no strategic gain. The Somme remains the ultimate symbol of military futility and industrial warfare's terrible price. In August 480 BC, approximately 7,000 Greeks made a legendary stand against the massive Persian army at the narrow coastal pass of Thermopylae. King Xerxes I had assembled an invasion force, estimated between 100,000 and 300,000 soldiers, to conquer all of Greece. King Leonidas I of Sparta led the Greek defense, bringing only 300 of his royal bodyguard, men selected because they had living sons. For 2 days, wave after wave of Persian infantry crashed against the Greek phalanx and was thrown back with heavy losses. The elite Persian immortals fared no better than regular troops against the disciplined Greek formation. Ancient accounts describe piles of Persian dead choking the pass, while Greek casualties remained light. Xerxes reportedly watched in disbelief from his throne. A local trader named Ephialtes revealed a mountain path allowing the Persians to outflank the defenders. Leonidas dismissed the bulk of the Greek army, keeping only his 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and 400 Thebans to hold the pass. These men knew they were going to die but chose to fight to buy time for Greece. On the final morning, they fought with desperate fury. When spears shattered, they fought with swords. When swords broke, they fought with hands and teeth. Leonidas fell early in the fighting, and his men died defending his body until arrows finally overwhelmed them. Every Spartan perished in the defense. The sacrifice bought precious time for Athens to evacuate, and ultimately inspired the Greek victory that saved Western civilization. The Battle of Okinawa, fought from April 1st to June 22, 1945, was the largest and bloodiest battle of the Pacific War. The island lay just 340 miles from Japan, making it essential for staging the planned invasion of the home islands. Over 180,000 American troops participated in the largest amphibious assault in Pacific history. Japanese General Mitsuru Ushijima commanded approximately 100,000 defenders from elaborate tunnel and cave fortifications. American troops faced constant artillery fire, hidden snipers, and desperate banzai charges as they advanced. Japanese soldiers fought to the death rather than surrender, and cave systems had to be cleared with flamethrowers and demolitions. The battle for Sugarloaf Hill alone cost thousands of American casualties, for ground barely 300 feet high. Every yard of the island was paid for in blood. At sea, the U.S. Navy endured the most concentrated kamikaze attacks of the war, with nearly 1,900 suicide missions. Japanese pilots sank 36 ships and damaged 368 others during the campaign. Over 4,900 American sailors died in the waters around Okinawa, the Navy's highest casualty toll in any single battle. The destroyer USS Laffey was hit by 6 kamikazes and 4 bombs in one engagement, yet stayed afloat. American casualties exceeded 49,000, including over 12,500 killed, while Japanese military losses approached 100,000. An estimated 100,000 to 150,000 Okinawan civilians also perished, many through coerced mass suicide. The horrific casualties influenced President Truman's decision to use atomic bombs rather than invade Japan. Okinawa demonstrated the terrible cost of conquering Japanese-held territory. On June 18, 1815, Napoleon Bonaparte faced a coalition army on rain-soaked farmland near Waterloo in present-day Belgium. The Duke of Wellington commanded approximately 68,000 British, Dutch, Belgian, and German troops defending a ridge. Napoleon attacked with 72,000 experienced soldiers, while a Prussian army under Blücher marched to reinforce Wellington. Heavy rain the night before delayed the French attack until late morning. The battle opened with a diversionary assault on the Chateau of Hougoumont that escalated into day-long fighting. Napoleon launched massed infantry attacks against Wellington's center, only to see them shattered by disciplined British musket volleys. French cavalry charged British infantry squares repeatedly, but could not break them. The struggle for the farmhouse of La Haye-Sainte was particularly brutal. By late afternoon, Napoleon committed his elite Imperial Guard in a final desperate gamble to break Wellington's line. The Guard advanced through murderous fire, only to meet the British First-Foot Guards rising from concealment. Wellington shouted the order to fire, and the devastating volley staggered the supposedly invincible French elite. When the Imperial Guard wavered and retreated, panic spread through Napoleon's army. The Prussian arrival transformed retreat into rout as the French army disintegrated under combined pursuit. French casualties exceeded 25,000 killed and wounded with 8,000 captured, while Allied losses totaled approximately 22,000. Napoleon abdicated 4 days later and was exiled to St. Helena, where he died in 1821. Waterloo ended 23 years of European warfare, and the name became synonymous with final, decisive defeat. On September 17, 1862, the bloodiest single day in American military history unfolded along Antietam Creek near Sharpsburg, Maryland. Confederate General Robert E. Lee had invaded the North with approximately 38,000 men, hoping a victory would bring foreign recognition. Union General George B. McClellan pursued with over 75,000 troops after discovering a copy of Lee's battle plans wrapped around 3 cigars. Despite this intelligence windfall, McClellan attacked piecemeal rather than in coordinated assaults. The fighting in the cornfield became a nightmare of close-range slaughter, where troops charged and countercharged until corn stalks were cut to stubble by bullets. Control of the 30-acre field changed hands more than 15 times throughout the morning. Further south, Union troops finally seized the sunken road after hours of brutal fighting. The Confederate dead lay so thick that the lane became known forever as Bloody Lane. The battle's climax came at Burnside Bridge, where Union General Ambrose Burnside wasted hours trying to cross a stone bridge that could have been forded nearby. When his troops finally broke through, General A.P. Hill arrived from Harper's Ferry just in time to stabilize the line. McClellan declined to renew the attack despite having fresh reserves available. Darkness ended the fighting with both armies exhausted. Combined casualties totaled approximately 22,717, including roughly 3,650 killed outright in a single day. More Americans died that day than in the Revolutionary War, War of 1812, and Mexican-American War combined. Lee retreated to Virginia, ending his invasion of the North. President Lincoln used the marginal victory to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, transforming the war into a crusade against slavery. The Battle of Leipzig, fought from October 16 to 19, 1813, was the largest battle in world history until World War I. Over 600,000 soldiers clashed around the German city as Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Sweden converged on Napoleon's Grande Armée. The battle earned the name Völkerschlacht, the Battle of the Nations, reflecting the multinational character of both forces. Napoleon positioned approximately 190,000 troops against over 330,000 coalition soldiers. The battle began on October 16th with simultaneous Allied attacks from multiple directions. Napoleon's forces initially held and even launched counterattacks that nearly broke the Austrian line. However, he lacked cavalry strength to exploit any advantage, having lost most horsemen in Russia. The first day was inconclusive, but cost both sides tens of thousands of casualties. On October 18th, Saxon and other German troops fighting for Napoleon began defecting to the Allied side, turning their guns on former comrades. The coalition launched coordinated assaults from all directions, making the French position untenable. Napoleon ordered retreat through Leipzig on October 19th, but premature demolition of the only bridge trapped thousands of soldiers. French forces suffered catastrophic losses as the escape route collapsed. French casualties exceeded 73,000, including 30,000 captured when the bridge exploded, while Allied losses totaled approximately 54,000. Napoleon retreated to France with only a fraction of his army, having lost Germany forever. The The battle shattered French control of Central Europe and led directly to the 1814 invasion that forced Napoleon's first abdication. Leipzig demonstrated that even Napoleon could be overwhelmed by coordinated coalition warfare. The Siege of Leningrad, lasting from September 8, 1941 to January 27, 1944, ranks among history's most devastating sieges. German Army Group North encircled the Soviet city of nearly 3 million people, intending to starve the population into submission. Adolf Hitler declared his intention to wipe Leningrad from the face of the earth entirely. The only lifeline was a treacherous route across frozen Lake Ladoga, called the Road of Life. By November 1941, the daily bread ration had been reduced to just 125 grams, roughly 4 slices mixed with sawdust and cellulose. Temperatures dropped to -40 degrees as fuel supplies ran out, and people burned furniture for heat. Residents ate wallpaper paste, leather belts, and eventually resorted to cannibalism to survive. Bodies piled up in streets because survivors were too weak to bury them. A narrow land corridor was finally opened in January 1943, but the siege continued for another year under constant German artillery bombardment. Factories continued producing weapons while symphony orchestras performed to maintain morale. Shostakovich's Seventh Symphony premiered in the besieged city in August 1942. Soviet forces made repeated attempts to break the siege at enormous cost. The siege was finally lifted on January 27, 1944, after 872 days of unimaginable suffering. An estimated 1 to 1.5 million civilians died, primarily from starvation and cold. Military casualties on both sides added hundreds of thousands more to the toll. Leningrad's ordeal surpassed that of any other city in World War II, and earned it the designation of Hero City. On October 10, 732 AD, a Frankish army under Charles Martel confronted an invading Umayyad force near Tours in present-day central France. The Umayyad Caliphate had conquered the Iberian Peninsula 2 decades earlier and now pushed deep into Frankish territory. For Charles Martel, defeat meant the potential end of Christendom in Western Europe. The Umayyad army under Abd al-Rahman had swept northward through Aquitaine, sacking cities along the way. Charles positioned his battle-hardened infantry on high ground between Tours and Poitiers, choosing terrain that favored foot soldiers over cavalry. For 7 days, the two armies faced each other without major engagement, as neither commander wanted to surrender his advantage. When battle finally commenced, Umayyad cavalry launched repeated charges against the Frankish lines. Charles had trained his men to fight in a tight phalanx formation that held firm against every assault. According to later chronicles, the Franks stood like a wall of ice, immovable as stone against wave after wave of Arab horsemen. A critical moment came when Frankish scouts attacked the Umayyad camp, threatening the plunder accumulated during the campaign. During the confusion, Abd al-Rahman himself was killed. The death of their commander ended the battle, as the Umayyads retreated under cover of darkness, abandoning their camp. The invasion of Western Europe was halted, and the Arab threat to France never returned. Charles Martel earned his nickname, the Hammer, for his decisive victory at Tours. The battle marked the high-water point of Arab expansion into Western Europe and preserved the Christian character of the region. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu, fought from March 13 to May 7, 1954, marked the decisive end of French colonial rule in Indochina. French forces established a fortified garrison in a remote valley in northwestern Vietnam, intending to draw the Viet Minh into conventional battle. General Vo Nguyen Giap secretly positioned 50,000 soldiers and hundreds of artillery pieces in the surrounding mountains. Porters hauled guns through jungle trails by hand, while French intelligence completely failed to detect the buildup. The battle began on March 13th, when Viet Minh artillery opened a devastating bombardment that shocked defenders expecting light resistance. The airstrip was rendered unusable within days, cutting off the garrison from resupply except by increasingly dangerous parachute drops. French counteroffensives to silence the guns failed with heavy losses. One by one, outlying strongpoints fell to human wave assaults. Monsoon rains turned the valley into a sea of mud as Viet Minh forces dug approach trenches ever closer to remaining positions. Wounded soldiers could not be evacuated, and supplies fell critically short. French commanders desperately requested American intervention, including tactical nuclear weapons, but Washington refused. The siege tightened relentlessly for nearly 2 months. The final assault came on May 6, overwhelming the exhausted defenders as approximately 11,000 French soldiers surrendered. Nearly 3,000 were already dead with thousands more wounded, while Viet Minh casualties exceeded 25,000. The defeat shattered French will to continue the war and led directly to the Geneva Accords partitioning Vietnam. Dien Bien Phu demonstrated that determined guerrilla forces could defeat a modern European army. The Battle of Kursk, fought from July 5 to August 23, 1943, was the largest tank battle in history. Following the disaster at Stalingrad, German commanders planned Operation Citadel to eliminate a large Soviet salient around Kursk. The Germans assembled approximately 3,000 tanks, 900,000 soldiers, and their newest weapons, including heavy Tiger and Panther tanks. Soviet intelligence detected the preparations months in advance, allowing the Red Army to construct 8 defensive lines. The offensive began on July 5, with massive German assaults on both shoulders of the Kursk salient. In the north, German forces made minimal progress against deeply fortified Soviet positions. In the south, SS Panzer divisions achieved greater penetration, leading to the titanic tank battle at Prokhorovka on July 12. Hundreds of tanks clashed at close range in swirling dust and smoke. Soviet T-34s charged directly at German Tigers, sacrificing themselves to close the range where their guns could penetrate heavier armor. Losses on both sides were severe, but Germans could not afford to replace theirs. Hitler halted the offensive on July 13, partly due to the Allied invasion of Sicily threatening his Mediterranean flank. The Soviets immediately launched massive counteroffensives. German losses exceeded 200,000 casualties and over 500 tanks destroyed, while Soviet casualties approached 860,000 with over 6,000 armored vehicles lost. Despite these staggering losses, the Red Army had reserves to continue while the Wehrmacht did not. From Kursk onward, Germans fought exclusively on the defensive as Soviets drove them relentlessly toward Berlin. The battle marked the permanent end of German offensive capability on the Eastern Front. Thank you very much for watching this video, and if you learned something, make sure to leave a like, comment down below your thoughts on any of the battles I discussed in this video, and subscribe if you would like to see a part 2 or more videos like this one. Thank you again, and goodbye.